Today I'm going to talk about the needle juniper, the Juniper rigida. And the Juniper rigida is a species that's used extensively for the beautiful driftwood effects. So almost all Juniper rigida have beautiful driftwood. So this is an example of a very large specimen. This particular tree was sold to one of my customers about 12 years ago, and it appears in my book Bonsai Secrets, which I wrote for the Reader's Digest. This must have been written in I think it was written in 2010 or 2012, and this is the very tree. If we come and have a close look at it, this particular tree, as it appears in this book, is like this. And this is the very same tree. But you can see that some of the lower branches have died. This one has died. This one is still there. So one or two branches have died. This is what happens when customers do not take care of their trees. Many people buy expensive trees, and they think that once they buy the tree will stay the same for the rest of its life. They don't realize that trees grow and the trees will change. I always say to customers who buy these trees, is that like buying an expensive car, like a Rolls Royce or even a Jaguar or whatever. And once they buy, they think they don't even have to service the car. Good bonsai is just like an expensive car. You have to service it. You can't just leave them to their own devices and expect them to take care of themselves. They have to be serviced. So if they are very stingy in servicing the tree, or don't know how to do it themselves, or don't bring them back to the nursery for servicing, it will fall into poor condition. So as with most junipers, even the needle juniper, like the Chinese juniper, they suffer from a very common insect pest called scale. If again we come close to this tree, I will show you exactly what I mean. It is not infested with scale, but there is some scale apparent. These little white specks here, almost like lice that you get on hair, this is juniper scale. And if you leave it unchecked, it can suck the sap of the leaves and cause a lot of damage to the leaves. So you usually have to spray this to get rid of it. Fortunately, it's just beginning to appear. I've spotted it in time. So one spray will get rid of it. So junipers, you've got to watch for scale, otherwise it can damage the tree. And of course, they need regular pruning. This tree hasn't been repotted for about 4 or 5 years. So it's still quite healthy. I did check the roots. It's not entirely pot bound. So all I need to do is, I brought it back to the nursery about 3 months ago, and I let it grow strong. I fed it a little bit. In fact, some of the fertilizer is still here. And I will now proceed to just give it a quick trim. Again, trimming it is quite easy because we are not altering the structure of the tree. This is usually best done in the early spring. April or May is a good time. Just when the first flush of growth has started. And if you remember, I say in some of my other videos, I like to let the trees grow some foliage, because by letting them grow foliage, quite a lot of foliage, it makes the tree strong, because the foliage feeds back into the trees. So letting it grow a bit makes sense. Constantly trimming it to keep it in its perfect shape may not be such a good idea. Again, I may be wrong, but that's the way I prefer to do my trees, and they usually stay strong. With needle juniper, Juniper rigida, they have a natural habit of their branches dying back. And that is the reason why needle juniper have these beautiful driftwood effects. From time to time branches die, and then the dead branches are made into these lovely bits of gin and shari. This tree I purchased in Japan maybe 1996 from Nagoya, and it was sold to this customer 2007, and he has asked me to give it a trim and a checkup, but it's not regularly serviced, I'm afraid. So this is what I'm doing. So all these long shoots, the trees have put on a lot of growth since I've fed it with fertilizer, and it's quite vigorous. So this is the simple part, because I'm not changing the shape of the tree in any way. You will get quite a bit of this brown needle. That is to be expected. And the leader is still okay. But I've had to be patient to wait for the new growth to grow before I give this hard chop. The needle juniper is very prickly. It's called needle juniper for a very good reason, because the needles or the foliage are like needles. They are needle sharp. They really hurt. And I guess that this is one of the reasons why Juniper rigida or needle juniper is not such a popular tree nowadays. Back in the 80s and 90s, this was very popular. Still is to some extent, but as I say, not as popular as the ordinary Chinese juniper, Chinensis, Itoigawa, and all those different variants. I would also add another thing. When I used to go to Japan, many of the Japanese growers used to use the trunk of needle juniper, Juniper rigida, and they used to graft Chinese juniper. They used to graft Itoigawa on the trunks because it had such beautiful driftwood. And Japanese growers are very good at grafting, so they used to get fantastic results by grafting Chinese juniper onto rigida trunks. I have one particular tree, only a smallish one, and I'm regrowing that, but the trunk is absolutely fantastic. Look at that beautiful shari you get. As you can see, this tree, pity this was in the front, because this would have made a very beautiful front, but the tree has been trained to lean that way. So this side is very nice. They do grow from cuttings very easily, and they also grow very easily from seed. So propagating this is not difficult. And of course, I've seen in Japan they air lay these big trees, because in the wild they grow and sprawl around, so they get very long straggly trunks. And if you air lay them in different places, you get lots of nice trees from one single parent tree. Look at the shoots. This shoot, which is about 40 centimeters long, this has grown since April. So you can see how vigorous the tree is. And This is about, I would say, 4 mm thick. It's a bit thick to make a cutting. The ideal cuttings are about 2.5 mm thickness. So if you remove the bottom foliage ever so quickly, that's sort of length cutting, and it will grow. And of course they also grow from seed very easily. And needle juniper, there is male tree and female tree. And of course only the female trees carry the berries. So if you have a male tree and a female tree, you'll certainly have berries. And the berries grow again very easily. And if you grow them well, it doesn't take long to get a decent plant. But to get a tree with massive trunk like this and old wood, this would be really old. So this tree, when we imported it, has been in the UK for over 25 years. I would say this tree on a stage would certainly be about 100 years old. So in just a few minutes I've trimmed this tree. Okay, and I'll move on to another one. Now this is another very favorite tree of mine. I will show you photographs in this video. I will attach it to this video of what the tree looks like when it is in exhibition and show condition. Now you must be wondering why I've left this to grow. Clearly I've left this to grow unchecked because I wanted the tree to grow strong. I find that many bonsai, if they are grown constantly in their bonsai pot, especially a very small bonsai pot, does weaken the tree, and over a period of time they tend to go downhill. So this tree is having a 2-year break. I've taken it out of the bonsai pot and I've put it in this basket consisting of moss and just ordinary compost, and lo and behold, look at all that strong growth that I've had. Look at this. This is about 70 centimeter long, that shoot. That is 2 years growth. From here to there, about 60 centimeters this year's growth. So they do produce long shoots if you leave them unchecked. But all the tree is still there, and all I have to do is bring it back to its original condition. And that one, there's a bit of driftwood there. I can make sure all that can come off. It may look a bit unkempt, but believe you me, in just a couple of minutes we can bring it back to its original condition. It's all there. And look at that, another 50 to 60 centimeter shoot. This is the back of the tree. Those of you who are more serious about bonsai may be aware that the Juniper Rigida, the needle juniper, has 3 different varieties depending on the length of the foliage, the needles. This one, I would say, is a medium length needle, and the needles are about, in old coinage, about ½ an inch long. And then there is a yatsubusa. Yatsubusa in Japanese simply means miniature or small. And those junipers have foliage which are about ½ inch long. And then there is another variety with very, very long foliage, and that has a more vigorous growth, and That one is not such a popular one because the needles are long. So it's usually the small foliage ones and the medium foliage ones like this one which are popular. At the end of this video I will show you some short foliage ones. I once had a tree which is now not in my collection, but I sold it, which is a 500-year-old tree, and that came from Japan like many of my other specimens back in 1962, and I've been the owner since about 1974 or 75, and I sold that tree probably 1995, but I still see it regularly because that tree I service on a regular basis. So this customer calls me in to service that tree. There are not many customers who do that, but this particular customer, a very discerning customer, he just enjoys looking at the trees, but he asks me to service them. I'm always conscious that I may be giving the wrong impression about the care that some of these trees need. What I'm doing in just a few minutes, trimming off the long shoots, is not the end of the story. There is much more to taking care of trees than what I'm doing. What I'm doing is just superficial. I need to go in and possibly even wire some of the branches again in order to make it look good. This tree has generated a lot of interest. In fact, I had an American customer. He didn't buy any tree, he used to buy pots. He wanted to buy this tree to ship back to the United States. But the shipping and the quarantine regulations were so onerous that he didn't pursue it any further. But this is a very beautiful tree. Look at the spiral effect. This shari here, it spirals around the trunk. And this is all genuine. This is not faked in any way. We call the rigidas very spiteful trees because they are quite a job to handle. The needles are so sharp and vicious that if you are of a weak disposition, you won't want to be pricked by the needles. All lovely cuttings, but even making cuttings with the needle juniper is not something I like doing because it is very spiteful tree. I'm not doing any extensive wiring because that would take the best part of a day, and you don't want to be spending 6 or 8 hours with one video seeing very intricate wiring. But this gives you just the raw basics of where I've brought the tree back, and then there's going to be a lot of detailed wiring to make this tree look nice for exhibition purposes. Of course, now that I don't exhibit my trees, I'm not that worried. I just keep them reasonably healthy and neat. And the other thing with junipers, like the ordinary Chinese juniper, you have to remove the bark from time to time. Remove the bark with a sharp knife. Because the bark peels as it grows. Can you see? You peel the bark off like that. and then you can brush it with a wire brush. But that's usually done when you've done all the work, including applying the lime sulfur to the driftwood. But this is what lies underneath the bark. Although I haven't done it all, I will just show you with the wire brush the effect. See, just by brushing the new bark, it comes a beautiful red color. But I think it's important to remove all the old bark. I don't have my penknife with me. It's best done with a penknife or a Stanley knife. See, like this, you remove the bark. And you get the lovely red color. So this is just a little taster of what you can do with tidying up the junipers. And then the driftwood, we can put lime sulfur again. Lime sulfur is just to give it that visual effect. It does preserve the wood to some extent, but I don't think it preserves it that much. And some of these bits can be tidied up too. So this gives you some feeling of what this tree is like, and I'll show you the photographs of it in its heyday when it was used in exhibitions, and it will go back into its bonsai pot next spring. There you go.